Okay, well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the UPA plan for a safe return to in-class learning. Before we begin, if we can just make sure, I think in our webinar, we can ensure that your computers are on mute. Just take a moment to make sure that your computer is on mute, and that'll help make sure there's not so much background noise, and we can make sure that everyone can hear all of the important information. This presentation stimulates a lot of questions, and we want to make sure that we give as much time as possible to answer those questions. And to whoever Jay is, thank you for all of the questions you've already sent in. We'll do our best to answer all of those questions as we go along. But as questions come up during this presentation, please feel free to ask them and then put them in the chat. And throughout the presentation, we'll take breaks to make sure that we get your questions answered. Before we get too far, what we know as of July 14th, 2020, is that no matter what school looks like, school will start on August 13th. And we'll talk about, and we'll talk about that as we go along. Everything that you're going to read and see today and everything that you've seen in the reopening guide is matched with the information that we have from the County Office of Ed and the Health Department. We are paying attention because if you've listened to the news, Governor Newsom is going to be sending out some increased guidelines for education and requirements for in-class learning. So we are expecting that there could be another shift, and we're continuing to watch the increased numbers in terms of positive cases, hospitalizations, and the ability for our healthcare systems to respond to those increases. At this point, we are planned for in-class learning to be hybrid. And we will talk more about that and what your choices are as a family. We are prepared for hybrid in-class learning, and we'll continue to support distance learning as well. As we go through, you will see that we've been thinking a lot about how do we create a safe learning environment for students, staff, and the community. And speaking of community, I wanted to just take a moment because this event, the third of our community meetings, we also have more meetings with the staff, and we'll set up another meeting with students as well, is truly that we're not just thinking about the students that are in the classroom, not just about the staff that are working in the campus as well, but also when we say community, we're talking about the loved ones at home, the ones that might not necessarily be directly connected to a child who's attending UPA, but still could be impacted by a positive COVID case. And those are the biggest concerns, is that we create a safe space for not only our students and our staff, but for you as well and your loved ones, and especially for those that are immunocompromised. We just saw in the news today that Florida had their highest case of deaths today. And it's just a really sad and somber moment that we just want to take a moment and be really joyous of the fact that we as a community can come together to protect each other. And the decisions and conversations that we have today are coming from that point of really wanting to care for the community that we call UPA. It is something that I cherish greatly, and I want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to ensure the community's safety. When we start talking about safety, there are best practices that have been identified. The first of which is personal protective equipment, or PPE. It's important that staff and students have access to those. Personal hygiene practices. This is going to be an ongoing practice, making sure that students and staff follow all of the CDC guidelines, that they are sanitizing their hands, washing their hands, avoiding contact, face coverings, learning how to cough and sneeze into your armpit. Into your elbow, not your armpit then. And then avoid the sharing of educational supplies, especially food or drink when it comes to a community like a school. Social distancing is important. And if you've read the American Pediatrics Association's report about returning schools, social distancing is a critical part of their plan. And I'll show you some pictures of some of those classrooms. We're also talking about shared spaces and being able to space people out during break or lunch. We'll also be talking today about deep cleaning protocols and how we are ensuring and minimizing the spread of viral particles. Education, that's our business, but we're also talking not only about the content that happens in a math, science, or English course, but we're also talking about making sure that the entire community, and remember that's staff, students, and you, have the most current information that we have. And that's, again, every time I do one of these presentations, I update the information based on what we are getting. So today you're seeing the most current information that I have available to me. And then one of the most key pieces is preventative measures. What can we possibly do to ensure that we are protecting and going as far as possible, in some cases, maybe doing more than we have to, but the whole end of the day is just to make sure that we've done everything humanly possible to ensure the safety of our students in our community. And then we also have to have a response plan for individual illness. And if we have to go back into something like we experienced last March, where there's a school-wide quarantine or shutdown. And we want to dive a little bit deeper into that today. When you talk about a plan for reopening, it comes in 5 basic areas. One is facilities, then there's instruction, and so what happens inside the classroom, how is in teaching and learning looking differently, the staffing protocols, the student protocols, and then what happens as a response to individual group or county outbreak of COVID. So let's start off with facilities, and at the end of the facilities conversation, we will pause and ask some questions. First of all, one of the key pieces and is important is that we've established and we've been walking through and taking lots of pictures and making sure that every hallway has one-way traffic, that it is pre-designated pickup and drop-off locations, and you can see that outlined right here. And then daily temperature scanning and screening. The screening, what we'll talk about in a few minutes, is really just about asking 3 basic questions. If someone in your family has COVID, if they've had someone in the family quarantined due to COVID, or if they're experiencing any cold or flu-like symptoms. And then we're also talking about constantly ensuring that there's hygiene and social distancing enforcement. And by hygiene, we're going to have outdoor hand washing stations. We will have sanitation or hand sanitizer at the entrance of every single building, and then we'll also have hand sanitizer in every single classroom. In the bathrooms, we are reviewing our processes and protocols. We'll have limitations to the number of students who can use a restroom, and then also increased signage and training on proper sanitation after using the restroom. And then throughout it all, you'll see increased supervision. So you're gonna see a lot more people out and about to make sure that we're enforcing these one-way pathways. And just kind of to highlight how difficult it is, when I first came up with this map, I was so excited and happy about it, feeling like we really had this nailed down. We identified all the signs we're gonna use, and then later that day, I found myself at Safeway getting some school supplies, and I didn't pay attention to those one-way signs. And they had done a beautiful job of putting signs on the floor and the walls and everything. It's because it's not just the signs, it's also about being able to train people and remind them. And that's why we need that increased supervision. When we're talking about break or lunch, it's about safety throughout the day. And so we've expanded the student break areas. In those boxes that you see in red, those have maximum capacities. So each one has been measured by square footage, and we are preparing those currently. And the purpose of that is so we can ensure that there's social distancing. Social distancing also will partake of our energy bar, our grab and go, which provides our free food. And then we're also going to be partnering with My Green Lunch. And So as part of the startup package, we'll be introducing My Green Lunch, which is a great hot food option. And the food comes pre-packaged, pre-identified for each student. And it's prepared off-site. So there's no handling of the food, and it's done in a completely sanitary way. And so it's one more option for families to be able to provide a wholesome lunch for their student, but do it in a safe way. We've talked a little bit about increased supervision. And then what you'll see in those boxes in yellow is how we're moving staff and student parking to the edges of the campus to create those spaces. And then there's the inclement weather planning. So what do we do if we can't use those outdoor spaces? So what you see here in the picture, if Ms. Bustro is in the audience tonight, this is her math classroom. And what you can see is we have measured every single desk and chair. We've maximized the space. We've pulled out some of the accessory supplementary furniture. And then little orange tape pieces tell us exactly where those spaces and chairs are supposed to go. And so we're going to see teaching and learning a little bit differently. We have a great collaborative staff that likes to have our students work together. We're just going to have to shift that towards a instructional mindset. We'll talk about that in instruction. So we are currently doing this, and we're pretty close to being done to have every room set up in this situation. There are also going to be hourly cleaning staff and student cleaning protocols. We're also enforcing a no sharing is caring sanitation system. So we'll talk a little bit more later about school supplies and asking parents to provide those school supplies. We'll be removing any lounge or soft furniture. So some of the rooms have beanbag chairs or reading corners, and unfortunately those will have to be removed while we are doing social distancing. And then there's similar preparation for offices and shared spaces. And when you walk into a classroom, what you can't see in this room here, if you were to turn to the left, there's a large maximum capacity, and that includes students and staff in terms of how many people can be in a room at a given time. At the beginning and end of class time, doors will remain open so that students do not have to touch a doorknob or touch a handle in order to enter a classroom. There's regular sanitation that is going to be done all over the campus. Classrooms will be managed by our teaching staff and shared by our students. So we're asking students to participate in the cleaning up of their areas and their areas only. Offices will be cleaned and wiped down after every visit. I had some meetings today, and so after every meeting, I had to pull out the wipes and wipe down the area. In terms of shared spaces, we'll want staff to clean up after themselves and to wipe down their areas. Handles and doorways will be done by our supervisors, and that will be done hourly. And every evening we use an aerosol preparation because that gets actually more effective than just wiping down surfaces. And we'll talk more about that in our Q&A as well. What will break and lunch look like? Well, students will walk out of a one-way pathway, and they'll go out into one of those red squares, pre-identified areas. And we're also working on building a shade structure over some of the parts of the parking lot to create and to encourage more outdoor time. It's great if we can encourage, and if you can encourage your students to be outside, because obviously the increased amount of oxygen in air will help to dissipate any sort of viral or any sort of droplets. If students want to go into a classroom to work with a teacher, maybe they're doing office hours, our teachers know that they're the max of 12 students and that the students have to clean up and wipe down the areas that they're using, and they have to practice social distancing. Students will not be allowed in the halls during break or lunch. Even outside, there's one-way pedestrian traffic. We're really excited about the outside hand washing stations. Those will be located at the drop-off areas, and then they'll be rotated around the campus as our needs change throughout the day, like for break or for lunch. And then it's just important that we just have to continue to reinforce no sharing of food, drinks, school supplies, or athletic equipment. So for our lunchtime activities, they're going to be pretty diminished right now until we get further down the road in terms of protection. So for all of our lunchtime basketball players, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to wait a little bit longer to make that happen. And then as you're walking around the campus, if you're a visitor to the campus, then you're going to see that there's a lot of PPE reminders, reminding people to wear masks, to social distance, to practice good hygiene. And what you see here in this picture is a mock-up of the shade structures. This is the Horton building, and this is one of our drop-off locations. We're going to be encouraging our band and PE classes to be outside whenever it's possible. And our band classes are going to make some adjustments. I'm meeting with our band instructor next week to talk about how we can still practice, but a lot more of the actual practice will happen at home. There'll be a lot more technical aspects happening in our band classes. For our PE classes, we are not requiring students to dress out. And we will be flexible with our dress code in terms of making sure that students, if they are wearing something that is school appropriate and matches with our school uniform policy, but if they want to use that during PE, that's fine. We are still looking at our policies and processes for students to change. But in the meantime, it's important that people know that our PE classes are going to be focused on non-ball curriculum, so no basketball, no volleyball, but more focused on personal strength and endurance. And again, those classes will be outside, and we're also asking other classes to consider going outside as well, and that's going to take some coordination. Here is another classroom. So if Ms. Pettit is out there, you will see her classroom right here. And right now, again, every desk and chair is social distanced. The plexiglass dividers will be placed on desks. They're currently back ordered and they should be here next week. And then teacher desks have been placed 6 to 9 feet from student desks. And our plexiglass dividers for our teachers and our offices are going to be here next week as well, and so we'll start installing those. Each room will have spare PPE, and so each room will have extra gloves, cleaning spray, disposable towels, and then also we have to remember that not only do we need to prepare for COVID, but we also need to be prepared for an earthquake, for a fire, or worse. And so we will still be doing our emergency response drills, and we're going to have to make sure every classroom has the emergency supplies. And most of that is actually currently done. And then rooms are going to be deep cleaned every hour and every evening. One of the questions that constantly comes up, and it's a great question, is that the hallways are crowded. We have gone through and we've identified, and the signs are all up in all of the buildings, that mark hallways not only on the wall but also on the floor as being one-way flow. The doors are marked as entry and exit points, and then staff will be on site to help direct students to the proper direction and enforce social distancing. We will be incredibly patient with students during this process because we know how much learning is going to, and new processes are going to have to be established. One of the great questions that came up, and I'm glad to be able to present this tonight, is that we are using a daily surface cleaner, which is made up of hydrogen peroxide, an organic rubbing alcohol, and that helps to dry the surface very quickly, and water. Our bathroom cleaner deodorizer is made of sodium carbonate, perlite, bentonite, and sodium hypochlorite, and water. So the sodium hypochlorite is like a non-abrasive cleanser, similar to what many other bathroom cleaning products. The perlite and bentonite are there mostly for as a deodorizer. Windows and sneeze guards will be cleaned with an organic alcohol, right now ammonium and water. And then our aerosol viricide is an ammonium and isopropyl alcohol combination. And what we're working with our custodial crew, and all of our chemicals used for cleaning have been approved by the FDA to be used in classroom spaces. Okay, drop off and pickup is going to be slightly different as well. So you'll see here that we have 3 different locations. One of them is they're broken up by grade level, and at each drop off and pickup location, you're going to see a tent and you're going to see a couple of staff members. And this is a best practice that we saw from many of our local hospitals, where we'll have one person who's using a touchless thermometer or using a thermal imaging camera. And there's another station for pre-screening. So one person will be asking the 3 questions. Do you have any flu-like symptoms? Do you know anyone in your home that has been exposed to COVID? And is anyone in your home self-quarantining? We're also sending out placards so that people can put on the front of their car what grade level they belong to, so we can point you in the right direction. If you happen to have multiple students with multiple grade levels, please make sure that you choose the highest grade level. So we try to make it as simple for you as possible. It's going to take some change, and we will make sure that we are set up by 7:45 every morning to do the drop-off locations. All right, I'd like to take a moment here, and Ms. King is going to help answer or ask some of the questions that we have logged so far.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. So today there are a number of questions, particularly surrounding whether all the other districts that are starting to say that they are moving 100% virtually for the fall. If an order is passed by Santa Clara County for all public schools, how will UPA stand?
That's a really great question, and if you've seen the plan, you've seen that our plan is quite extensive, and we're a small school with 700 students. To develop a similar plan for 24,000 students at multiple grade levels, I can't even imagine how challenging that must be for the larger school districts. We, as a smaller school, we're a little bit more nimble, and we can respond to the guidelines a little bit quicker than I think a larger school district can. We really are focused on making sure that we provide an in-class option, and that was a priority of Superintendent Dewan, who's in charge of the Santa Clara County Office of Education. As long as we can do it safely and meet their protocols, and tonight is about making sure we show you that we are meeting those protocols and hopefully exceeding them. So the decision for larger schools is multi-varied, and there's a lot of factors that go into that. If there is a countywide shutdown and Dr. Dewan says all public schools in Santa Clara County will go to distance learning, UPA won't have a choice but to follow along, because they authorize, they're our authorizer, and basically that is the boss that will determine whether or not we can open or close schools. At this point, though, I have not heard that indication. I spoke with the county yesterday in a couple of different meetings, and I heard no indication that we were moving that direction. When you look at other schools that are similar in size, other charter schools, they have very similar models that we do, with slight variations depending on what their priorities and what their parameters are.
Thank you. And do you mind clarifying which district UPA is a part of?
We are not part of a district. We are a county authorized school district, which means we serve all students within Santa Clara County. So that means our authorizer, the one who grants our license to operate as a public school, is the County Office of Education. So when basically the same rules that San Jose Unified is under, we are under, in terms of if Dr. Dewan were to say all schools closed, that means San Jose Unified would have to close and UPA would have to close. The reason why we can stay open at this point or plan for reopening is that we are our own district.
Thank you. Number of questions regarding masks. If students come to school without a mask, will they be provided one, or will they be turned away? And what will happen? How will it be handled if students are forgetful and start to take off their mask, or it's not on properly? How will that be handled?
I will speak about myself first, because I think it's important that we recognize the challenges that we're facing when it comes to wearing a mask. It takes a while to get used to them. It takes a while to get used to talking with them on. And there's a tendency, I'm a fidgeter, so there's a tendency to want to touch my face or touch the mask or move it around or shift it, and I have to be conscious of that. And so we know students will be in the same situation, and that the first month at least will be a constant reminding process. This isn't about holding kids accountable to a rule. This is about reminding them about hygiene and the purpose of wearing the mask. And one of the important things that we want to remind students, getting back to our idea about community and wearing masks, is, for me, I wear a mask not because I am protecting myself, but I want to make sure that I am protecting you and protecting someone at home. If you have someone at home who's immunocompromised or in that targeted group that COVID is most virulent in, I want to wear a mask for them. And we have to continue to remind that of students, that it's about a bigger picture. It's about community. It's not about themselves. So we are providing a cloth mask for every person in our community. So that's a student or teacher. We also have a stockpile of disposable masks. So if someone forgets a mask, that happens, then we can distribute a disposable mask for the day, or a surgical mask, and until they can get home and find their mask. We've also ordered extra cloth masks in case someone loses those and needs a replacement. We are going to allow students to wear their own masks that they might have already gotten and brought from home. But we do have some nice, stylish UPA labeled masks on the way.
Perfect. And with regards to supplies, with back orders on some masks and hand sanitizer and cleaning products, is it guaranteed that we'll have enough for when we open?
That's a great question. And I got to tip my hat. And anytime you see Miss Jan Rogers, I don't know if she's watching tonight or not, she started 3 or 4 months ago, it feels like. As soon as we realized that we're going to be in this situation, she jumped on it and has been ordering masks, disposable gloves, cleaning supplies. UPA is also really lucky to be where we are, partnering with Cathedral of Faith. There's a woman at Cathedral of Faith called Lynn Lazo. She is phenomenal, and she is always watching out for us and making sure that we have everything. So when she gets procurements for the cathedral, then she shares them with us, and it goes vice versa. And it's part of our lease, and it's just part of the community, extended community that really cares deeply about UPA being successful. It's a terrific question, and we are going to continue to replenish our supplies and make sure that we have enough to get through any given period downtime. But that's a really important, critical question. Let's do a couple more questions, Emma, and then we'll move on to the next section.
Perfect. So are masks a requirement for students, and what about if they're doing PE or if they're outside?
Okay. We'll talk a little bit more about masks in a little bit, but it is a requirement for reopening. So the Santa Clara County Office of Education partnered with the health department And both of them came up with a requirement that students of middle school and high school age are required to wear a mask. And I'll put a big asterisk next to that, because they left room for students who have medical conditions, or having difficulty breathing using from a mask. And the key thing with the mask, and if your child is going to have any difficulty wearing a mask, please see your physician, your healthcare provider, and we can have exceptions for students based on a medical release, similar to what we would do for PE or any other course. So for PE, while students are doing activity, they are not required to wear a mask. That has become inhibitive unless social distancing cannot be avoided. And in that case, we'd have to look at that activity in the first place. So the key, first of all, is when we're outside and students doing physical activity, masks would not be required, but social distancing definitely will be. When students are outside, they're still expected to wear a mask while they are on the school campus. And the reason, again, is we just don't know how students are going to interact, and we have to create those individual barriers to make sure that we're doing everything that we can. And I know we sound really conservative around mask wearing, but it's really just putting those layers of protection that we possibly can. So with that, I'd like to move on to what instruction will look like, and we'll answer a few more questions in a couple of minutes. So first of all, instruction, what happens in the classroom is we have spent a lot of time in reflection looking back at the wins and the challenges that we faced in March in our transition to distance learning. Just take a quick moment for any of the teachers out there. I applaud you. You were amazing. You jumped on distance learning so quickly, so immediately, and you were able to provide lessons for students the very Monday we had to go into distance learning. But the challenges we ran into is that our platform, it's called a learning management system, couldn't keep up with the amount of resources and the varieties of learning experiences our teachers wanted to provide. So we'll be able to release very soon the platform we're using to host lesson plans, resources, assignments, quizzes, and tests. It has to be a platform that's really robust, meaning that it can handle lots of stuff happening at once, and that it can link to live streaming. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But it also has to work with Google Docs. We're a Google school. We also have Office 365, which is a nice benefit for our students, but our platform has to connect with that as well. The way students are interacting with information, and if you think about some of our courses, let's think about our Spanish courses, for instance, it's going to be really important that students record audio files or do video files. And then PDFs are becoming a really important part of teaching and learning as well, or to send pictures or artwork up to their teacher. So it has to be a really robust process to also allow for feedback, to grade, and to eliminate paper. Paper can be a potential source of cross-contamination, and so we want to really reduce that and move to a really interactive learning experience. And then it has to be able to allow for collaborative learning. So whether a student is at home or a student is in the classroom, we have to be able to allow those students to work together. That's part of the mystery and magic of education at the middle school and high school level, is that the collaborative learning experience. The SIS, which is a student information system, it tells us the student's name, tells us your name, contact information, emergency stuff, but we also need it to be able to be quicker and faster and more helpful in terms of identifying students with IEPs, 504s, if they're English language learners, and then to pre-identify any potential struggling students or students who have stopped participating. We're looking at all of those features, and we're trying to, and we'll be able to in the next week or so, be able to reveal all of our work and show the improvements as we march into the fall. Anything that we do will come with student training, teacher training, and parent training. And we will make sure that you are fully prepared for anything that happens in the fall so that everyone can really participate in their child's education. Okay. When we're looking at different schedules, and I mentioned at the beginning that we're leaning towards and we'll move forward with a hybrid. This is part of how we made that decision. If we look at our traditional block schedule that we're using before we went to distance learning last year, your child saw their teacher 10 times a month for 90-minute periods, or they had 900 minutes of in-class learning per every 4 weeks. If we went to a block hybrid, your student would see that teacher 5 times a month for 450 minutes, and they would see the teacher through distance learning 10 times a month. It's all right. We're looking for the maximum that's going to create the maximum benefit. If we do an every period hybrid, meaning we have periods 1 through 7 every day, we'll be able to increase the number of contacts to what we've seen before, which is 10 contacts a month, for a total of in-class learning time of 550 minutes. And with live streaming, students will be able to see their teacher through live streaming 10 times a month. For a total of 20 times, or every single day, they'll be able to check in with their teacher. What that means, though, is a calendar, and if this gives you a headache, I apologize in advance for trying to make it as simple as possible. Students will be broken up into A group or B group. And we'll talk about August last, but one of the protocols that has come up and recommended from the Pediatric Association is that we look at week-long rotations of A group and B group. But while, we look at September 14th through 18th, while A group is in class, B group is logging onto the computer and through live streaming will still continue to participate in that class. We'll expand on that in a little bit. The key was to make sure that A group days and B group days were pretty much the same. And that there are some days where all students would be at home for support. Coming back to August, though, we do need to have a hybrid plan where students are rotating every other day. And the reason for that is we need to make sure that by August 28th, every student knows the platform that we are using. They are fully trained to have the agency to solve any sort of technical problems from home, that they have all of the resources, and they know how to communicate with their teachers while they're at home. And so the month of August is really focused on making sure students are fully prepared for the upcoming school year. All right. Live streaming. And again, this was an important push from some of our parents, and I just can't thank them enough for sending in their ideas and questions and meeting with me. And if you would like a meeting, I would love to sit down with you as well. So live streaming is going to allow us to place a web-based camera in the back of the classroom and broadcast a live lesson. So in a sense, at home, your student would be able to wake up in the morning, turn on their computer, log into school, and be at school in the classroom and see everything that a student who's in the classroom is seeing. And the purpose is that it provides a safe space for students to be able to see the teacher in action, and then also to follow the lesson. And speaking with some of our teachers, they are already starting to think about some of those collaborative learning groups. So it's possible that a student at home could be doing a think, pair, share, or maybe they're on a shared PowerPoint with a student at home. And then for the classroom teacher, it takes the burden off of having to create simultaneous in-class and distance learning activities. So teachers are going to continue to build up their lessons. And basically what we're saying is this process, live streaming, will allow your child to experience more curriculum and be able to gain more skills. There are many benefits of live streaming. Obviously, we just talked about the increases in content and curriculum. For students who might have to self-quarantine, maybe they don't have COVID, but they have to self-quarantine, they just switch to this model, turn on the computer, and they're still in the classroom, and they're not following behind. It allows for a teacher who's self-quarantine. Again, given that they don't have COVID, but they're having to do a self-quarantine, we could hire a sub to be in the classroom, and the teacher could live stream from wherever their home is. It'll allow us to monitor attendance for distance learning and identify students who are not participating. That was part of our concern, is that students would start a lesson and potentially move on to something else. And so we wanted to create a platform that we could see when students stopped watching the live stream. Most live streaming platforms will also allow for the viewer to post a question or send in a question. And so we're just looking at some ways to make that integrated into the lesson and integrated into the teaching. And so it's going to be kind of, I think it's going to be pretty cool that a student at home could ask a clarifying question about solving a math problem. The teacher sees the question and then does that in the classroom. And so I think it's just going to make the home and the school a lot more integrated. And I think it's going to be one of the most equitable learning environments for students. Live streaming is also secure, and so we have to have a platform, and we're finalizing the platform right now. But the platform has to have video that is captured inside of that platform and then cannot be copied or shared outside of the platform or downloaded. But it is going to allow for lessons to be archived, and so a student with a login could go in and go back to see how a lesson was done a week ago or a month ago, or if they're preparing for a test or a semester final, they could go back and see a lesson that they had missed, or a lesson that they needed to see again. Now, it's also going to be new to us, and it's going to be new to you. And so we're going to have to increase our IT staffing. And what that basically means is that if a teacher has an issue in a classroom, I want to be able to respond to that issue and get the live stream up within minutes. And it's going to take a little bit extra work to get everything set up, but our IT team is so excited by being able to provide this for our teachers and provide this for you. And then it has to be web-based. And so we've already tripled our internet bandwidth, and so that we can handle all of the live streams and the uploading of information. We have one of the challenges for live streaming, though, is to make sure every family has all the tools to be able to participate in our community education. And what I want to just express to you, and this is my ask for all of our families, I'll ask it a couple of times tonight. We have hotspots and laptops and other technology resources to help families prepare for distance learning. Please, if you need assistance, it's not based on monetary income, or you don't have to fill out a form for the government or something. You just have to have a need, and we're going to be able to provide a support for you. The other part is, if you know of another student or another family who is struggling, but they are not asking, please encourage them to reach out. We're here to help. We want to make sure that technology or other resources are not the reason why a student struggles in school. What does the day look like? Obviously, it starts at 8:15, but this time, instead of being done at 3 o'clock or a slightly different time every day, it's going to be done at 3:55 every day. And so we're going to have an extended school day. And that's because we have 7 periods, unlike many other schools that have 6 periods, where the traditional end time would be around 2:55 or 3 o'clock. We will still have staff on campus, and I know some people, many of our families commute and they need to pick up their child after school at 4:30. While we ask for families to pick up their children as quickly as possible, for those that cannot, we will still have staff available as we have in the past. But while they're waiting before school or after school, They will not be allowed to wait in the hallways. They'll have to be in a classroom, and they'll be maxed to 12 students and social distanced. There's been a lot of conversation about what hybrid schedule is, what 100% distance learning via live streaming is, or what this Edgenuity thing is. And so basically what I wanted to provide here, and this is also in our guidebook, is that the hybrid schedule is that students are broken up into 2 groups. And we're looking at different ways of separating the groups. So the key thing is that we are keeping the classroom socially distanced. And that's our key priority, is the safety of our students. Students would come in alternating weeks, and then when they are not in school, they would be live streaming. Attendance is taken whether they are in school or at home, and it is the default that we will be going to. And what that means is you don't need to fill out any application, you don't have to say anything. We do have a survey coming out tomorrow, and we really need everyone to participate in that survey so we have a really clear understanding of what the needs of the community are. 100% distance learning via live streaming is that students are enrolled in their traditional schedules. It's the same as the AB students or hybrid students. They follow the same bell schedule as the hybrid students, just doing that from home. Students will participate via learning live stream, but they never show up to school. But they do have to participate in attendance. The state requires that students who are staying home for distance learning, whether it's Edgenuity or live streaming, have to take daily attendance. And this is a request program. So what that means is in that survey tomorrow that we send out, we do need you to select that you are choosing to participate in the distance learning, 100% distance learning. And what is this versus Edgenuity? Edgenuity is a third-party curriculum program. So they run, basically they're a whole separate learning program, and we'll match the Edgenuity program or Edgenuity courses to a student's traditional schedule, but they're on their own schedule and their own study times. We will pace it out. We will have a UPA teacher to be there as a support network, but it's 1 teacher for 6 subjects. And so it's going to be limited in types of support that it will provide. But it's going to be more of an onus on families to coordinate the support if they need help with the math course or they need help with some of the other courses. Attendance, again, is still taken by UPA, and that is a daily process. All right. I'm using my laptop and I can see that I'm squinting a little bit. So if you're doing the same, you can open up the guide and you can see in a larger format. And what we just tried to do is compare the different programs. And what we found out is, again, just to underscore, is that what we do best at UPA is in-class learning and teaching. And that is our strength. But you can see that if you were to choose 100% distance learning via live stream, we've tried to make it as connected to the school as possible and try to make sure that it matches up and that students get as much of a rich experience as possible. But we all went through distance learning, and we know that there are some issues and challenges around socialization, around connectedness that students will feel in distance learning, and that's a challenge. But we have to balance that with student health as well. So I know that you are challenged with that. And then you can see within Edgenuity some of the limitations, but also some of the benefits, especially if we're talking about prioritizing personal family safety and health. Some of the in-class or some of the instructional questions that come up quite a bit. What happens when a student is in class? What will they experience? They'll come into the classroom, the teacher will lead the instruction. There will be a lot of peer-to-peer interactions with social distancing, most likely through technology. There's going to be opportunities for teacher and peer tutoring. There's obviously going to be a review of the previous day's work, preparation for the next day's work, and then all proctoring of assessments will take place in the classroom. And again, attendance would be taken. When your child is off campus, they'll still follow the same bell schedule. They'll log into the learning management system. They'll get a link to the live stream. They'll turn it on, and then they'll follow the lesson. They are going to be expected within that same hour to complete the same assignments the students inside the classroom are doing. And so teachers are working on adjusting their curriculum so it can be done at home or done in the classroom. If there are virtual group activities, and I think you're going to see a lot of our teachers move in that direction, they are expected to participate and fully participate in those. And then if there's homework assigned, and you can see the breakdown of that in our guide, they're expected to do that homework just as if they were inside the classroom. What will happen? How will I know if my child is in A group or B group? We are trying to keep it as random as possible. But if you have concerns about that or transportation issues or multiple siblings, that survey tomorrow is going to be really important. Not only will it tell us what your final decision or what your decision is as of today, whether you're going to go with the hybrid or go with distance learning. Also, that's a time for you to notify us if you have siblings or that you're choosing a specific group to be in. Just a quick shout out to Mr. Doherty. We had a beautiful master schedule and it was all created, ready to go. And then we had to blindside him with the hybrid schedule. And so he's readjusting the master schedule. So we're a little bit behind on our normal timeline, but when we send out student schedules, which will be near the end of July, you'll also be given whether you are an A group or a B group. And then if you're having any issues with schedules, we ask that you reach out to your counselors and start to talk to them about some of the important things that you need to make a decision about. What's going to be different in the fall in terms of instruction? We are, like I said before, we are super close to identifying and signing a contract with an improved learning management system, something that students and parents could use more easily from their phone, that gives teachers more tools, that has connections to other programs. So if you have students, I know we have some teachers who use something called Nearpod. So we want people to be able to use Google or Nearpod or any of the other different tools out there and be able to link it back to that same system. The idea is, as a parent, you turn on that grading system and you can see your child's grade, you can see the assignments, and you can see connections to those assignments. It will integrate with Google Suite. Again, we're a Google campus, and will allow for the upload of video, audio, or other multimedia. And then it also is going to be a more centralized and easier process to communicate from myself to you, or from you to me, or to the teachers. And then if you've read through the guidebook, you'll see that we've got more specific guidelines around teachers updating grade books and returning work, and making sure to communicate that with you at home. Okay. Ms. King, I'm going to take a sip of water while you get some questions going.
Great question. Is there input from our teachers and staff? Are they also willing to teach face-to-face in the fall? And is it voluntary or a directive?
Wow, that's a very good question. We introduced the potential of a hybrid and coming back in the fall when we ended the school year just a few weeks ago. We've been updating the staff as well and been answering as many questions as possible. We have one more staff meeting, community meeting tomorrow. And for those staff that might have health issues or other concerns, we're working with them to provide alternative options. The staff at UPA is so dedicated to the students, and I want to make sure that we're respecting that and responding appropriately to their needs. They will have a voice in the final determination of what this looks like, just like our community does as well. Their voice is really important, and a lot of this guide has been improved because of their input.
Thank you. And this is a new one to me, but if a family chooses hybrid learning, or pardon, chooses to be at home learning or a combination of hybrid, could they come in just for lab classes, and or could they come in for extracurriculars?
Well, that is a new one for me as well. The rules around cohorts are pretty clear. And once a student has been established in an A cohort or a B cohort, it's really important that we don't start mixing students in different cohorts. And so if you choose 100% distance learning, we will need you to stay with that until you decide to come onto campus. If you're going to come onto campus, we want you to commit to the hybrid approach. Labs are, I've been meeting with a number of science teachers. Labs are a challenge and they're really trying to wrap their minds around them. And as a former science teacher, just trying to wrap my mind around how do we do more digitally based or experiments or modules or models online. There's a lot of great resources out there, but it's still not the same as the in-class labs. And the other challenge is those 55-minute periods. So I know our teachers are working on that. So even if you're at 100% distance, you'll still be able to participate in one way or another with those labs. As terms of extracurricular activities, that's going to be a challenge. Right now we're reviewing all of our extracurricular activities to determine whether or not they can continue moving forward. A lot of our extracurricular activities like clubs will most likely, they'll continue to happen at lunch in outdoor spaces or in limited groups or through digital means. So if you're doing 100% distance learning and there is a digital Wink or Link crew or Web, which is our introductory programs or welcoming programs, you can fully participate in those extracurriculars. There's just some that you might not be able to participate, and we're still working out those kinks. We're gonna have to take it day by day on that.
Will there be a presentation on Edgenuity before we have to decide which option we select?
Yes, we will definitely put one together, and we will send a video out that, or a link to a video about what Edgenuity does. The key pieces are to really speak, and one of the people that I would really recommend, and if you want to email me, that's fine, and I can connect you with him, but Mr. Yao, one of our administrators, has worked really exclusively with Edgenuity, and he knows the strengths and the challenges of the program. While the video will be really helpful and kind of give you a perspective, I think getting to know the real ins and outs, getting you connect with Mr. Yao would be a great idea.
Thank you. And how many students are going to be in a classroom at a time? And if you're 100% distance with the live stream, are you in a group A or a group B? Or how do you figure out when you're supposed to be watching what classes?
Okay, that's a great question. I really like that question because I think it tells me that we need a little bit more clarification. That's great. So thank you for that. First of all, if you are on distance learning, you are not in A group or B group. You would just log into the computer every single day and participate in the live stream. The only difference between that and the hybrid is that the A group would show up one week and then stay home, just like the 100% distance learning students the next week. And so the lessons, students are going to be expected to check in every day, just as if they were in normal traditional school. And I think I forgot the other part of the question.
And then how many students are in a classroom?
For the most part, we're looking at about 15 to 16.
Perfect. And just a couple more clarifying questions surrounding live streaming. Do students have to have their webcam on? are they able to ask questions live? And will they be able to attend any live stream office hours with a teacher?
Okay, so if they are live streaming, the platform we're using or looking at right now, students do not need to turn on their webcam. If they're going to do some sort of tutoring with the teacher, and the teacher wants to use Zoom, then it's going to be important to be able to turn that webcam on in those instances. So those are the two aspects in terms of the distance learning piece, in terms of being able to participate. So I think that answers both those questions.
Perfect. And then one more about that, which I'm trying to remember where I was. Okay, on a different page. Is there going to be a decrease in course material covered during this school year?
Yeah, I think that's just going to be the reality. For as much as I would like to say no, everything's going to be the same. Given that we're going to have to teach differently, and I just want to go back to a picture real quick. I just want to show you a classroom picture. So imagine this classroom again. Students are so spaced out, and then there's going to be these plexiglass screens. So the way our teachers normally interact with students is it's really collaborative, and it's loud, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and students are really engaged in the work that they are doing, and they're working with their peers rather closely. Obviously that changes. And so what we're going to be seeing is there's going to be a change in instructional processes and patterns. And that's going to impact the amount of skills that we'll be able to do throughout the school year. When we were looking at one of the hybrid models, it looked like it was going to be pretty frustrating in that we might have to get down to 50 or 60% of what we normally cover. In our current model with live streaming, I think we'll be able to get up to 90%, but I do expect there'll be a decrease in the amount of content and coverage from traditional years, just because we're teaching in a different style and students are interacting with their information differently. And we talked about that first month, learning that new system. So learning to log on, learning to problem solve, making sure you have the technology. Those things are going to take time, and those are going to be challenges that will take some getting used to as well. So the challenges in moving to distance learning or moving to a hybrid approach will definitely impact the amount. But I think in this process, 90% is pretty darn good.
Awesome. You moving forward?
Let's do one more.
One more. Okay. So are students monitored by the teacher when they are at home? And if is a student able to look at another window while they are watching the live stream?
That's a good question. One of the questions I forgot to answer before, so forgive me, was could a student interact with the teacher while the live stream is happening? That's what we're looking at. So a student should be able to type in a question or answer a question or participate when they're at home. The question around being able to monitor the student, we'll be able to see that they log in, and we'll see that if they log out before the session is over. And so for us, we would consider that the same thing as a student leaving the class before the bell rang, if we had bells. Then the other part is if they were to go to another screen, that's going to be a little bit more tricky, and we're looking at whether we can do that without being too intrusive onto your own personal computers. And that's going to be a bit of a technical challenge. How much control the teachers will have in that? In the moment, they're not going to have a whole lot of control, but we will be able to monitor attendance outside of the classroom, and that's going to be handled by another person on campus. So there is some level of measurement and control, but it's really going to be dependent upon the student to really stay engaged and stay focused on the curriculum. So what's going to be different for students and families in this hybrid new approach? Well, one of the things is that we really need to ask you for your assistance. Is that before your child comes to school, that you help do some self-screening, and that you communicate with the school. We are going to be absolutely helpful and patient in working with you, especially around illnesses or absences due to illnesses, and making sure that those are excused. It's going to be really challenging when cold season flares up and COVID is still out and about, because there's going to be a lot of symptoms that are going to be very similar to COVID-like symptoms. And so one of the key things that we're asking is that you communicate if someone at your home or you have to, or your family has to go into some sort of self-quarantine, and that you conduct a temperature check before you leave the home. Just in case that is not done, we'll be doing temperature checks when a student arrives at school. But getting into that pattern would be really helpful for us. This kind of comes back to that conversation around face masks. I'll just skip down to the bottom. And again, the requirement for us to be open in Santa Clara County is that students must use some sort of face covering. We will provide face coverings. We'll provide backup face coverings for those that forget or lose them. And there are exclusions. And it's really just important that this is a conversation that is dealt with individually, and with your healthcare provider. Because anyone who's having trouble breathing with a face mask, please talk to your physician and make sure that your child is safe and can use a face mask. And if not, please bring in that doctor's note and we'll work with you. We just want to make sure that this is dealt with as an individual case. But it's important to underscore one more time is that in order for us to be open, we have to have face coverings. We're also asking for students to make sure that they're washing their hands as much as possible. Remember, we're going to have outdoor cleaning sanitation stations. We'll have hand sanitizer as soon as a student walks into a building or into a classroom. We'll constantly be reminding them through our lessons around covering and coughing correctly into their elbow, to social distance, and then to participate in cleaning. When they're using a desk, that they clean that desk before they leave. Again, social distancing is going to be really important, and we'll continue to remind students of that. If you can help remind your students as well, that would be terrific. The other thing is, it's probably not an if, but a when. At some point, UPA will have to close down for 2 weeks or a month due to a COVID outbreak in the area or in Santa Clara County. And so it's important that we start preparing for distance learning or full-time distance learning. Do you have the maximum home bandwidth that can handle multiple Zoom or live streaming events at once? Do you have enough devices for students to be on a live stream or on their computer from 8:15 to 3:55? Do they have a dedicated space for learning? And that everyone can access the learning management system. That includes you as the parent, the child, everybody, and that you can stay up to date on information. But you're not alone in having to prepare for distance learning. We are here to help, and it's just so important that we just get this across. We have laptops, we have hotspots, we have resources for financial support, and then we'll have multiple parent training in the fall to make sure that you have all of the tools and resources available to make this a success. It's just important to ask, and UPA is not dependent upon families acknowledging or explaining their financial situations. Every financial situation is different. And so it's important that you know that we have assistance for you. There will be a second survey coming out in the next 2 weeks around school supplies and technology. And we're asking for you to let us know if you can supply these things or if you want us to help you with that. It's a community. We're just one community, and sharing our resources is part of being a community. One of the questions that comes up quite a bit is, when does school start? August 13th. And what you see here on this calendar right here is that we're trying to expand our staffing training days. And I will be proposing to the staff tomorrow that we start actually on August 3rd, so that we can increase our days up to 8 days of training. The goal, again, is to make sure that every teacher can use the platforms, can use all of the tools, and is prepared for the adjustments that it's going to take to learn how to do live streaming, to be able to work with students who are in the classroom and at home. I won't go through this whole list, but we have been working to make sure that all of these things are going to be in place by August 13th. Unfortunately, there are some things that are going to negatively impact us, such as canceling large school events. There's being shifts and changes to athletics, strict limitations on other extracurricular activities. We can't have outside visitors or guests. And so there's going to be some changes and some impacts into our normal routines and some challenges to our school culture. And so how do we come together as a school and celebrate is going to be a challenge. We're going to have to find some new and unique ways to be able to do that in the meantime. As a family, what are the daily precautions? All we're asking is that you encourage the use of a face covering. Again, that's why we get to reopen at this point. Be a willing participant and support the guidelines, and communicate us whenever you have any sort of concerns. I've got a number of emails that came in the last probably 2 hours or 3 hours, and I'll try to get back to them either tonight or tomorrow morning. And it's just important that we have these open lines of communication and dialogue. That's how we're going to be able to survive as a community. And I really think if we can pull together, we can make this hybrid learning experience a safe and rewarding experience for our students. There is a requirement around extracurricular activities. And like I mentioned before, there's going to be changes to our band courses. There's going to be changes to our cheerleading practices and our other extracurricular activities. But just because they're closed, it doesn't mean that we can't continue to practice in one form or another. We can have small cohorts of 12 or less, and they can participate in club, drama, or athletic practices. There's no sharing that's allowed in those situations. Social distancing is critical, and in the cases where there is not some sort of physical exertion, masks are going to be required for those events. That is going to be key to continuing looking at unique ways that we can put on a small quartet band experience, or maybe a 2-person drama that we live stream at night, or other ways that we can celebrate things together. What do I need to provide for my child? It's going to be important that you provide a calculator, pencil, pens, colored pencils, paper, binder, school uniform. And then, once again, please, if you need to, reach out to Yariela Perez. She is amazing. She's a new part of our team, been with us, I think, since February, and it's been a real trial by fire, but she has stepped up to the plate over and over and over again. And her position as our business manager, she's been able to identify different resources for different families. So if there's something that you need, don't hesitate to reach out, and she'll be able to help you out. What do I want to do if I continue? What do I need to do if I need to continue distance learning? And a number of you have already emailed me with some questions about that, and that's fantastic. So please continue asking those questions. you are still part of the UPA community. I want to make sure that's in bold and underlined and highlighted. Just because you're doing distance learning right now does not mean that you're not part of the community. And it's important that our students know that, that whether they're live streaming at home like you are right now, you are part of the UPA community. And we only get through this together and being connected with each other. With live streaming is now reality. A student can continue to follow and participate in their current schedule, but stay at home 100%. In cases where live stream is not an option, we do have Edgenuity. And then again, tomorrow, that survey is just so important that we get everyone to respond to. In that survey, we're just asking for some really basic questions, what your fall plans are now that you've seen our reopening guidelines, our adjustments, our plans, and our focus on ensuring the safety of your child. One thing I do want to just take a note and just make sure is in the back of your mind when you're thinking about distance learning is when you're looking at making that decision, and maybe you're kind of wrestling with that decision. I had a great conversation last week with a parent about just the challenges that they're facing trying to make this decision. You don't have to make that decision alone. I also know that we have counselors available are willing to take some time and to reconnect with you and help you make the best decision for you and your child and your family. Right now, not only is Ms. Buenaceso one of our amazing science teachers, she's also one of our counselors, and she's also helping us with our social emotional learning components for our school. And then Ms. Dot Westerhoff has been not only a founder of the school, but she is the glue that really makes counseling work for students. And so she's got a great resource and can really help you with that decision. Edgenuity does have limited AP course offerings. They don't have as many offerings as we do. So it's just that might be something to think about if that was a concern. Not as much instructional support. Again, at the end of the day, we believe that the best education for a student is within the classroom with our staff, but it has to be done safely, and I just have to underscore that. And that decision around doing it safely is really dependent upon each family and what each family is facing. What about the staff requirements? What are we doing to ensure their safety and make sure that that they get to be a positive participant in our community? We'll have new daily temperature scanning. We've started that. It's again a learning process, and there's a questionnaire. Same questionnaire students are asked. They're expected to lead the hourly cleaning efforts, help enforce the student movement on campus, and then limit students in classrooms during break, lunch, or after school to 12 students. There are specific required PPE behaviors. We are providing every staff in August a face mask and face shield. Right now there's some information from CDC and from the World Health Organization saying there is some potential aerosol exposure to COVID, and which is why we're offering those face masks. It's also why we have those desk shields. That's why teachers will have desk shields as well. There's hand sanitizer that is expected as they enter a building, or that they make inadvertent contact with somebody else. And they're also there to enforce a no sharing policy. They will have in their classrooms disposable gloves. They're eliminating the paper assignments, and then practice distance learning while students are in the classroom. And then we're also providing staff lab coats, and that was a best practice we learned from Kaiser, is that they provide lab coats for their employees so that their regular clothes don't come in contact or are protected against COVID. What happens if there's an outbreak? It's multivariate, and I'll try to summarize all of these charts and as quickly as possible to get back to your questions. There's scenarios where a student is exhibiting behaviors, extended temperature or high temperature, flu-like symptoms. We've designated an isolation space. The student will wait there until you pick them up and get them to a healthcare physician. After they're done with that space, it goes through a super deep cleaning process. In the situation where a student or a teacher actually contracts and tests positive for COVID, it'll be important that we track and trace. And so knowing who's in each group, where students are sitting, all of those types of things are going to be really important, and who's had contact with that student. And you will be a participant in that track and trace in those situations. Whenever we get a positive test, we'll be working with the county health department to help us make the right decision about what we need to be able to do as a response. If someone tests is removed because they have COVID-like symptoms, again, the elevated temperature, cold or flu-like symptoms, they need to get a COVID test, and then they can't come back to school until 72 hours after the exam has passed. So it's just important that we follow these processes, and it's also important that students know and parents know that if a student is out due to COVID or flu-like symptoms, that work will be, the school work is excused, meaning that the student will have an opportunity to make up that work for full credit. In terms of a staff member, if they are out due to COVID or having to self-quarantine, that does not come out of their sick leave bank. It's important that both of those points are noted, because we want to make sure that people are making good decisions and they're making conservative decisions about their health and the health of others. A few more randomly asked questions is, how do we ensure all of the things that are in that document are done? Well, the first is that we're going to be doing daily checks by the administration. We have a great team. I really love working with this team, and I really feel like they know how important this is, and they're treating it very seriously. And there's going to be increased staffing to make sure that we're screening students and that we carry out our safety mission. And then we have also set aside some staff members to participate as part of our monthly audit team. And so in order to get that blue check, we have to make sure that we have all of the communication standards put in place, that the physical facilities and instruction pieces are put into place, and that your child and your family are protected. And they are separate of the administration, but they report directly to me. If they find something at fault or something that is not meeting to standard, then we'll fix that immediately. How long do you see this lasting? I wish I could look into the future, but the challenge right now is we're looking at least the first semester. It seems like the conversation right now is that we won't be able to go to a full 100% student returning to campus 100% of the time with everybody together until there is a vaccine. But that's not really my call. It's the call of the county health department, the state health department, the governor, and all of our elected officials. Do you foresee a full school closure due to an outbreak? Most likely, and that's why we're doing monthly or regular COVID checks for our staff, and it's just important that we are ready, and that's why we're dedicating that first month of August to make sure that parents, students, and teachers are prepared in case we have to go into some sort of distance learning as an entire school. This sounds like a lot of staff training. Are you ready? Yes. We have expanded, and we've asked staff and notified them that we want to expand to 5 days. And then when we meet with them tomorrow, I'm going to ask that they give up even a little bit more summer to go to 8 days so we can make sure that they're fully prepared. And then how will you be training students on following through with these protocols? We will still have our seminar classes, and they'll be split into basically two functions. One of them is to constantly remind students about the importance of all of our health precautions, giving them the most current information around COVID in terms of what they can do, and then also making sure that we are continuing our social emotional learning. This experience has put a lot of strain on all of us. We're really dealing with a lot of different experiences. In middle school and high school, socialization and adaptation are really critical parts to growing into a full adult. And to have taken that away, it's been a real challenge for many of our students. And when I've spoken with them, I know it's a challenge. So we do need to address the social emotional learning. And the great thing is for those students who are 100% distance participating in live streaming, they'll still be able to participate in those courses. That's it. You survived. Let's answer a few more questions. Ms. King.
Okay, I didn't unmute myself, so I wouldn't need you this time. Perfect. Um, so looking at restroom monitoring, who and how will we monitor doorknobs, taps, flushing, etc., making sure that they're all wiped down? And will we just be providing gloves to students before they enter the restroom?
Gloves is an interesting idea. Right now, we will be cleaning them with a disinfectant spray, very similar to the aerosol that we'd be using um, on regular intervals throughout the day. One parent sent in a great idea that we'll be implementing, which is we will increase the staff near restrooms. We obviously can't go into a restroom while a student is in there, but we can limit it to a certain number of people. So what we're doing right now is being able to put some signage up, and then again, helping to ensure that students are not crowding in our restrooms. But that's a definite concern, and it's something that we are continuing to look at.
Perfect. So for students who are taking their math placement test, will the outcome be carried through with the live streaming options and reflected in her schedule?
Absolutely. Ms. Drury's been working really hard, and I know we have some teachers who are coming in to help administer those exams. And so for those families that are looking for math advancement, especially coming in as a 7th grader, participating in those and the results, if a student is going to advance, that would be reflected in their schedule and reflected if they continue with 100% distance learning.
Perfect. Will students be given the same amount of schoolwork and homework during hybrid or online learning compared to traditional learning?
Well, that's a difficult question. I do have an answer, but it's difficult because we're moving from a block schedule to more of a traditional schedule, periods 1 through 7. And in the guide, we put some limitations on middle school, high school courses, and then AP courses. We don't want to overload our students, but we also know that one of the things that we do really well is prepare students for their AP exams and give them challenging activities. It's going to be a shift, and we put some limitations. Those are listed in the guidebook. And right now, when we meet with the staff, we'll go over those. But right now, we're looking at about 30 minutes per course for middle school or high school non-AP courses as a maximum per course, and then 40 minutes for AP courses. Not every course is going to have homework, and not every course is going to have homework every night, and it's going to vary. Many of our teachers put together plans where a little bit of work is built up over a long period of time. It's really important, especially now, that students pay close attention and do and follow the teacher recommendation going a little bit each night.
Perfect. And then is there a capacity where if too many families say that they want to be in person, would there be a point where that would be unsafe, or we would have to say no to some families?
No, our model right now for hybrid is based on all families participating in the hybrid. And right now we're trying to figure out what that percentage is, who's going to participate in distance learning. So there would not be a situation where we would turn families away.
Thank you. And how do the thermometers work? I know that some thermometers need time to reset between uses.
The ones we've been working with and testing, they do need about a half second to reset. It's photovoltaic. Basically, what it means is it sends a light signal to the forehead, and the light bounces back, and depending on the speed that the light returns, it tells us the temperature of the skin. It does not involve a laser or anything, and so the reset is really fast. We're just waiting for the shipment and the training on our thermo imaging cameras. Those are handheld devices. We ordered some for the staff check-in area and also for the pickup drop-off areas. Again, those don't use lasers, they use light as well. And those can actually scan large groups of students or people. From what I understand, it's up to 20 people at once.
Thank you. And then if families are switching between distance to hybrid or from hybrid to 100% distance, how much lead time should we give this school?
If we're doing that in the middle of the school year, if you're going from hybrid to 100% distance, I don't think we need much more than 48 hours to be able to respond to that. If you're going to go the other direction, you're 100% distance learning, and you're coming back to coming into the hybrid, you probably want to give us at least 72 hours so we can let the teachers know and make sure that we might, in some situations, change the structure of the room a little bit if depending on how the teacher has set up that space.
Perfect.
And
And for families who choose the 100% distance learning, are they still required to buy school uniforms?
No, they're not. But I did hear an interesting conversation with a parent, not one of our parents, but a parent who wanted to buy the uniforms even though their child was on distance learning because they wanted that sense of transition in the day. That they're putting their uniform on and they're going to work. And they felt like their student approached the work while distance learning a little bit more seriously because they put the uniform on. I don't know if that would be the case for your family, but it's just an interesting aside.
Will students still use school-provided textbooks?
Yes, and we will have a checkout system similar to our check-in system that we ended the year with, where students would and families would show up in pre-designated time periods, and it would be contactless checkouts.
Okay. And during live streaming, will both A and B groups take tests at the same time?
Yes. Well, yes. Let me put an asterisk on that because I'm speaking for 35 teachers. It could vary, so we just need to be prepared for that. If there is questions around testing security, some teachers might have the home group do some sort of alternative assignment while the other students take the exam in class and repeat that process the next week or in some format along those lines. So I definitely want to make sure that we give teachers the flexibility to be able to assess the way that's going to work best in their classrooms.
Awesome. Would you explain a little bit more about My Green Lunch?
Absolutely. My Green Lunch is a local company. They're based outside of Willow Glen, and they specialize in providing individualized student lunches. So they're prepackaged. Families will be able to log on using the phone or a website, be able to select from 16 different daily options, and those options rotate. And the cost is rather minimal. For a student who qualifies for free or reduced lunch, then the cost is either zero or very small. And they would just go on, anybody could go on and pick a lunch item, and then it's delivered to the school, again, contactless, and it would have their name already printed on it. They've been preparing for this eventuality ever since we went into shutdown, and they did a fantastic job during the shutdown to provide individualized meals for healthcare workers, for hospitals, for frontline employees, and then for different organizations while they're waiting for schools to resume. And so when we get closer to the start of school year, we'll be really pushing My Green Lunch so that you know that it's an option for you. And it's one less thing that you have to bring onto campus, and one less thing you have to bring home. And that's something to think about.
Thank you. So will those few exceptions that of people who cannot wear masks, will they be tested periodically?
Tested for COVID, is what I think the question is relating to. I have no regulation on whether or not I can test or force a family to test a student for COVID. So I will do some research and get back to you on that question. So Emma, if you can start that one, we'll make sure we answer that with all the other questions.
Yep. And who is checking temperatures, and how will they be trained?
We have our campus supervisors and administrators helping with taking temperature, and we've been practicing with them this summer. The process has been pretty simple and pretty clear. And then we've also been working with some outreach to some different physicians to make sure our plans and protocols are correct. And they gave us some basic guidelines around temperature checking. The key piece is that we are not coming in contact with the student at any time, and that we're not sharing the thermometer with other personnel without them being cleaned first.
Perfect. And can students wear something comfortable for PE from home only so that they don't have to change at school?
That's a great question, and I would encourage that. We got that question earlier today through an email, and we are going back and looking at our clothing requirements, especially for bottoms, pants and shorts, etc., to make sure that we have some exceptions for that, since we are not going to be enforcing dressing out as a requirement or part of the grade for PE. It's just important that students wear something that's appropriate for PE, and that they're not, I don't know, sweaty or feeling uncomfortable for the rest of the day because they were wearing pants or whatever. So we're still reviewing that process, and the new syllabus for PE, when that comes out, will be we'll flesh that out more clearly for our students who are taking PE.
Perfect. When will we get our group assignments?
That's a great question. We are looking at the end of July or very first part of August. And again, we're having to redo quite a bit of stuff because we were planned for a block schedule and making an adjustment to the hybrid plan. We had to shift some teaching assignments around because of our part-time teachers. And so there's some challenges there, and if it wasn't for Mr. Dory's leadership on trying to make sure that that is done and done well, we would definitely be lost without him. So we really appreciate his efforts to make that happen, and we appreciate your patience in waiting for those schedules. We're going to try to make them contactless, meaning that we'll try to have them sent out email style.
And if there's a power failure or internet problem at home, is there a way that that the students could catch up with the classes they might miss due to those issues?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that because if you remember way back in October, we had those power outages due to the fires and PG&E shutting down different sections of Santa Clara County as a preventative measure. And so that's been kind of in front of my mind around distance learning. And so there's a guideline in the outlined in our book that describes that we want parents to be able to communicate as quickly as possible. And again, that's depending on what the power situation is or technology challenges are, to communicate that to the teachers and to administrators so that we can make sure that those assignments are excused. The side benefit of being able to archive lessons is that if a student were to miss a lesson, they could go back and rewatch it again. It's probably not the most exciting Netflix to watch, but it could definitely be a resource that we haven't had before. I'm excited by that part.
Do distance learning students have access to online office hours with their teachers?
That was a question that was asked before and I didn't answer it, so thank you for asking again. Yes, anytime that we'll have online office hours, anybody can participate in those. There's going to be, depending on how interactive, we might not necessarily be using the live stream in those sessions. We might be using something more intimate like Google Hangout or a Zoom in those situations because it's probably going to be a smaller group.
Perfect. And so the Santa Clara County of Education guidelines do not match those of the CDC and the California Department of Health. Shouldn't the county and schools follow the most restrictive guidelines?
That's a good question. I'm gonna breathe for a second on that one. You've kind of underscored one of the key concerns and the challenges that we're facing in this current situation is that there are discrepancies in the federal, state, and county guidelines. And that's part of the frustration and why I think our guidebook is so large, is that we're trying to marry the best of those and trying to respond to the most restrictive or most conservative approach to ensure the safety of children and their community. The number one guideline that we have to meet is the one that is printed by Santa Clara County and approved by the County Board of Education and the Health Department. And they've provided some very clear recommendations, and they're been very informative, and I've read through them multiple times. And if you haven't had a chance, please email me and I can send you a copy. You can go on to the Santa Clara County Office of Ed and read their guidelines. Their goal is to create a safe space for in-class teaching to take place, but they do leave the discretion to each district to implement the rules and requirements as they see fit.
Thank you. Just circling back to labs at 100% distance, can you explain that a little bit more?
Well, what I'll explain right now is that we're still in the process of trying to figure the best approach out. And so there's 3 significant challenges to doing labs right now. One is that we're going from a 90-minute period to a 55-minute period. The second challenge, and so being able to get a lab done in 55 minutes takes a different type of mindset. And having taught biology, physiology, and AP biology in the past, in both a block schedule and in a regular bell schedule or 55-minute period, it's a challenge. You have to be really on your game in terms of making sure all of the equipment is set out and then we can enter into the lab as quickly as possible. And so what that does is the day before you actually do the lab, you're doing a lot of preparation and walk through of the lab beforehand. And then you do the lab the next day. The second challenge is that we have smaller groups and we are limiting sharing and increasing safety equipment. And so thinking through the labs as a science teacher, you think of labs generally in groups of 4. And so you're used to dividing things in that portion and you're ordering materials in 4 groups of 4. And now we're talking about groups of 2. And so doubling supplies and do I have all the equipment? That's been a challenge. We're trying to work through that piece. And then we have the distance learning participants as well. How do they get to see what's going on? How do they get to participate? And how do they get that same experience? So those are and that's what we're working with right now, is trying to find more online options so that everyone could participate. I've done many pig dissections in my life, and I now know that there are virtual pig dissections. It's not necessarily the same thing, doesn't give you the same feel, you don't go through the same experiences. But given the situation we are in, that might be an example of a viable option that everyone could participate in, but still continue to lab-like settings. So it's still in progress, and the thing I can tell you is that our teachers are really invested in wanting to make the lab experience real for our students. And as a science teacher, it excites me.
Thank you. So just like 2 more questions, really.
Okay.
So how will band classes be handled through live streaming?
Very similar to an in-class setting. There will be a little bit more focus on music theory and being able to the technical aspects without necessarily, there'll be less play time or playing of the instrument time in the classroom setting. We have some really cool partitions that we've identified and purchased, and they just arrived today. So we're putting those together that will allow students who are in class to participate. The distance learning students would most likely have to record themselves playing, upload their recording into the platform, and then our music teacher, Mr. Ramirez, will then review and give some feedback based on how they're playing. So band as we know it, in terms of like this big conglomeration of different instruments playing together and really forming that musical connection, that's going to be a significant challenge in that we can't really play close to each other. And so it's going to be a little bit more individualized, and I think it's going to be a big shift. And I can tell you that Mr. Ramirez had already started working on that curriculum even before we left, about trying to identify different ways to do music through a digital platform. And when you get a teacher who's excited about trying to find new ways, you know you're going to get some good product out of that and good experiences for students.
All right, and last one. How many times will kids be told to wash or sanitize their hands as they need continuous reminders?
As many times as it takes. And the real challenge for the adults is to be calm and to remind and live from that lens that this is a new practice, and this is a new behavior, and it's gonna take a lot, and it's just gonna take a lot of reminding. And we're gonna have to do it in a way that doesn't ostracize or upset people, but also gets the message across. And it's just gonna take a lot of reminding. It's gonna be kind of fatiguing for everyone. It's gonna be fatiguing for people to hear the message over and over again. But we have to keep doing it until we get it into people's mindsets. I'm hoping that through that constant reminder process, maybe there's a silver lining in which we start to see a decrease in other colds or other flus because we've increased our daily hygiene practices, and we are not, and we're cleaning more, and we are creating a healthier environment. So maybe those are too optimistic, but I'm hoping that there's something positive on the outside of this experience, and that we walk away with this idea around really keeping ourselves clean at all times and practicing good hygiene. So is that the last question?
There's a follow-up to that right now, which is perfect.
All right.
With increased washing of hands, will there be moisturizer available?
Well, I hate to end this whole thing saying I didn't think of that one yet, but I haven't thought of that one yet. How would we? So I'm gonna have to think about how we could provide hand moisturizer without and still make sure that it's a non-contaminated surface. So if anybody has any ideas about that one, send it on down because it's not something I was thinking about off the top of my head. So you got me on that one. So I will get to work on that. With that being said, I know we went a little bit longer than some of our other presentations. I just wanted to take a quick moment and thank everyone for participating in tonight's community meeting and last week's community meetings, for emailing, calling, for sending messages of concern and sending messages of hope. And I really truly believe what has made this school unique and what really attracts me to the school was the sense of community. And I really have felt that really personally. And I know that our students do as well, and I know our staff does. One of the things I keep sitting back and thinking about is why does our staff seem to get great results from kids over and over and over again? And part of that is the fact that you are thanking them and that you recognize the work that they are doing. Whether you are a student or a parent, a cousin, or whatever, the fact that you stand with and stand behind our staff makes their work valuable. They're not doing their work in a shadow. They're not doing their work in isolation. They're doing it in conjunction with you. So this concept around distance learning and the frustrations that we're all experiencing with and wrestling with, it's easier to deal with all of those pains because we're a community, we're united, and we're together. And we want the best options and the best results for our children. And that I want to just thank everyone for. It's been Ms. King reminded me, as of tomorrow, I am 1 year in. Thank you for making it a really interesting first year. I have loved every day of it. I have loved the challenges. I loved I loved trying to work through the challenges of those power outages in October. Starting off with a reauthorization, jumping into distance learning and experiences that no one has ever experienced before, and including we're all in this thing together. But I'm energized. I'm excited. This has been fantastic, and I know it's difficult. I know that sometimes it feels impossible, but at the same time, it feels doable because the ingredients for quality teaching and learning is the fact that we're together and doing this together and believe in the outcomes. So I thank you for that. Thank you for coming tonight. We have recorded this session. We will post this one as well. And so you can see any potential differences. And the reopening guidebook is still a work in progress, and it will be perfect when everyone has had their opportunity to give their input. So thank you and have a good night.
Takes a little bit.